Awesome. Well, you guys know my route, right? You guys introduce yourselves much better, so tell the people who you are.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kristin Sword, and I'm the VP of Marketing at Octave. Octave is a behavioral health company focused on prioritizing the needs of payers, providers, and patients in perfect harmony, which, pardon the pun, is hard to keep in tune. And we are starting with therapy. So,
hopefully this is on. If not, trust me, I used to do theater. I don't need Mark Miranda-Abate, Margarita, but everyone calls me Mark. And there we go. And I lead global corporate communications at Sanofi, and in oncology specifically.
Good morning. I'm Tarak Shah, or Tarak. The Sanofi. I go by either one. So I lead customer engagement at Ferring Pharmaceuticals. Customer engagement is a recent team that we built within the Ferring organization. And our role is we partner with our brand teams on building out their customer engagement strategies, and then my team executes, enables, and optimizes those strategies through an omnichannel approach. So our team is focused on omnichannel strategy and operations, and it's really great to be here.
So we know that content is one of the most important things that we have to put out, right? Let's talk about just what are some of the challenges that you guys have in building a content strategy within healthcare specifically?
who wants to start?
I'm happy to start. I mean, for me, we talked about this when we had met. It's content for the sake of content. I had told when we kind of had all met, my whole rule, golden rule, is if you're building content, you have to use it at least 3 times. If not, why bother creating it, right? You create something, it sits there, that's really nice. It's like going to a party and nobody knows that you're there. Buying that dress and you only get to wear it once. No, it's like if you're creating something, it should be something that you can use multi-channel.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, just to add, I think the challenges with building sustainable content and having a sustainable content strategy, I think it starts with having a clear and sustainable marketing strategy. But then I think you also have to have a clear and sustainable customer strategy, customer engagement strategy. And so what I mean by that is, you're taking your marketing objectives, but then you're really focusing on your customer audiences. I know today is focused on the patient side of things, but I think it also applies to any of your customers, whether it's HCPs or even accounts or institutions, really thinking about your customers very deeply and what insights do you have about your customers so that you can analyze your customers in a different way, understand their behaviors, their preferences, their needs, and be able to use that to define specific engagement objectives. And what barriers, for example, do your patients have to access or to use your product? From an HCP perspective, what barriers do they have, right? So what are those insights? And then really informing your engagement objectives. What are you trying to achieve with your engagements with your customer segments? Are there certain barriers or beliefs you're trying to drive or change? Is there a future state you're trying to create with your brand and your customer? I say brand, but you really have to put the customer at the center. We talk about customer centricity, but when you have, for example, patients, you have personas, you have segments, you really have to put that at the center and think about what is the right sort of engagement approach with those segments. And then from there, I think that's where you can really start to define that content strategy, again, that aligns to your engagement objectives. And then think about your channel strategy. What's the most effective way that you can deploy that content through the right channels? And again, I think that's where the insights are most important, where you really have to understand where your customers are going, how they're engaging with those different channels, and then how you can align that to your engagement approach.
Definitely +1 to customer engagement. And I was thinking back to what someone said yesterday about the 3 Ps. And when I think about this for our team, especially since we are smaller and in that startup space, I think about things from a process and a people standpoint. So one of the things that's been incredibly important for us in allowing this use of content is creating a process where the brand book, the customer insights, those things that we hold true are trained and known for anyone who's producing the content and creating that process of sharing that information thoughtfully. And then on the people side, we actually have to give a lot of autonomy, right? So the person who runs our B2B sales marketing versus the person who runs organic social, we are training them on who we are from a brand standpoint and who our customer is, and then giving them the autonomy and saying, okay, now go create for your channel. We are not gonna check and guess everything you do. We do this thing actually what we call audit after, which is they're allowed to go out in the world and we track everything that goes out in the world, and then we spot check later to make sure that things were in line there, unless it's obviously a huge campaign that sort of breaks our standard day-to-day rules. But I think that autonomy of people mixed with that training of what is true, who is the customer, and then that belief and trust in them to run at it and be that feedback loop for the rest of the team is how we're able to share content and learnings and really reuse from that pool.
There has to be a large level of trust there if you're letting them put the content out first and then you're like, let's see what happens from there. How did you build that up internally?
Has anyone in this room been a part of a startup? Oh, great. How many of
Only
you?
this side.
Yeah. I think this is very much a part of the process where we do not have the luxury to check everything. I think at a certain scale, this does not make sense, right? There are processes that make sense at different scales of companies, but for us, we need to move quickly, and so there is a lot of trust placed. How do you know that? I think it comes down to hiring the right people, which in the startup space is some of the most important things you do early on, and that is the trust.
Yeah.
But yes,
But
it is a
I
little
think
scary.
that's really important because working for a big company, that's one of the things that we've been discussing. I came from consumer into pharma, and consumer you can work a little bit faster, a lot faster, and you can get away with a lot more. So we've been putting processes in place. Regulatory and compliance may not love me, nor legal, but hey, listen, this is what we kind of want to do, and we're going to do it in real time. I need you to trust me that I know what we're doing, because if not, you're going to fall way behind. I think one of the things that I wanted to add to what we were talking about earlier, because I've seen it a lot here, and it's a pet peeve of like audience first. I never think of audience first. You have to think of audience led. Audience led is in everything, right? Push, pull. I don't believe in push messaging because you lose your audience. I forgot to look it up, but it's like, I don't know how many millions of messages bypass us a day. Think about it. Our tablets, what we read, the snippets on TikTok, Instagram. I hate X, but I still look at X. Threads, I look at Threads. Reddit, Discord, I look at everything. Comms, I have to read everything. And how do you break through the clutter? You have to be where your audience is. It has to be audience-led. It has to be pull. And then you weave your story in. I actually love the fact that you trust your team to do that. A little scary, but I love that you do that.
If we take Margarita's 3 rule, right? Every piece of content you create must be used at least 3 times. How are you guys thinking about either adjusting that content for the channel or for the audience to extend the life of it, or is it truly just copy paste and put it in a different platform?
For us, it is not copy paste, but we typically start with stories. So for our brand, we care very much about quality content and education, and it really started from blog pieces driven for SEO. And because there's so much content in it, it's easy to take that and then say, how does this look as a social post versus a video of a therapist saying these top 5 things versus a beautiful PowerPoint slide for the sales team. So it really has started with that long form content, and then we're able to distill it down into different areas. So it's the same consistent information, but in different formats.
Yeah, same for me. It's all grounded in storytelling. I use this analogy all the time. What are your messages, right? If you think of Snow White, 3 messages. She lived with 7 men. She ate and poisoned apples. She shouldn't take things from strangers. And for some reason, some woman she didn't know hated her and talked to a mirror. Everything else around it is context, right? Oh, that her, she loved to skip through the forest. She talked to the birds, and that's all context. But what are the 3 messages? Now you take that and you adapt it to the audience, because we all know that there are many different versions of the story of Snow White, right? So Whether it's for a media interview, it's, as you said, for something on YouTube, it's something that's going on LinkedIn, and it's a thought leadership post. The messages remain the same, you just adapt it.
Totally agree with both of you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I totally agree with both of your comments. And I think also, our team is focused on capabilities, right? And there's so many great capabilities that we have now, whether it's new platforms, data, orchestration, next best action, where we have that opportunity to take content and be able to repurpose or, be able to tailor that content for specific audience segments or customer segments. And so the ways in which we can, take content and be able to adapt that content for a specific persona, and then be able to orchestrate that through a journey. And realizing also that sometimes the deployment of that content through that channel is not the right time to engage that particular customer, right? And you're not gonna get that engagement, but there might be another opportunity down the road along that journey where it is the right time to serve that content to that customer, right? And so having those capabilities to be able to understand where that customer is and when is the right time to reach that customer with the right content, truly is gonna be the most impact that you can get with the content you're gonna have.
So we have all of these different audiences, right? We talked a lot about it yesterday, the diversity that we have to appeal to. We have all these different channels that we're going through. How do you just maintain that flexibility while still producing the content needed to just run the business?
I think that for us, it is always resource constraint. It's a lot of prioritization. So there are 1,000 pieces of content you can produce, but we try to be pretty rigorous about, we know our time is the most valuable asset. And so every time we look at the opportunities we have, we'll weigh it against one another. And we do like an ICE ranking system for us, an impact, confidence, and ease ranking system every time we go to do a piece of content. And then we will look at that later, probably like quarterly, and compare ROI to that to make sure that we're guessing and checking ourselves against what we believe to be true.
I look at it as kind of like a roller coaster, right? What are the moments in time? I start first with the audience. What's the audience that I want to impact? So based on that, is there a congress that I need to really reach HCPs coming up? All right, well, what's my dial-up of my content going to look like? What are my other partners doing? What are the other cross-functionally? What are they doing? Who are they targeting? Are making sure that our messages are aligned. We dial it up. Maybe it reaches a high point, say around ASCO, right? The Oscars of the oncology world, so to speak. And you maintain that through a certain time, but then maybe our next tentpole isn't until ASH, right? In my business. So what am I gonna do? Who do I need to reach during that time? Is it key opinion leaders to make sure that the messages that we want or the content that we want stays true and top of mind? Is it patient advocacy groups? How do I work with my public affairs colleagues and my advocacy team colleagues? And what are we doing as we're getting ready to launch? And then my next tentpole moment. So I really look at it as the audience, and I look at it like a roller coaster. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. Sometimes we're at a 2, sometimes we'll dial it to 11. Anybody who gets that reference points. But you're always on.
Yeah, I think as marketers, we want to create a lot of great content, right? And when we talk about omnichannel, we want to get to that sort of N of 1. How can we create specific content for that individual that's going to resonate with that individual, right? I mean, in theory, that's what we want to do. I think in reality, we all realize that creating content is very hard. It's very time consuming. It's a long process. We just had an internal conversation yesterday where, we had this consensus with the marketing teams that like the way in which we're creating content right now and our agencies, their processes, it's taking a lot of time to get content out in the market. So there's definitely a challenge that we need to solve for in terms of how we can create content efficiently that's personalized for our customer and be able to get that to the customer. I think some of the ways that we're exploring that is, I think, for example, leveraging external partnerships with solution providers that have that ability to take your content and be able to adapt that content within that specific channel, right, within the right sort of contextual setting, right, that can get you that reach and scale to maximize the value of your content and your assets. I think also, internally it's about, and I'm sure other companies have this in place, but it's, do we need to work with our agencies to create all of our content? Is there a way that we can start to build more of a internal model, right, in terms of content creation, content production, where you can take sort of tier 1 content and be able to create different versions of that content for different audience segments and be able to get that LMR approved much faster and be able to get that out to the market much faster as well. So, these are the things that we're really trying to figure out that ultimately can help serve our customers much better.
Tarak, you hit the nail on the head, right? Creating a lot of content is hard. There's no other way around it. I'm going to introduce our second favorite acronym, AI. Yeah. How are you guys thinking about AI in content creation, and is it ethical? Is it responsible? Where does that come into your play?
I think AI is going to completely change the game, but it's not just AI, it's creating the prompts for it to write and create the right content. That is a whole different skill set. That is how your brain has to work differently. I mean, when I have a 19-year-old, and when I hear sort of adults say, oh, the kids today, I'm like, the kids today, they're wired differently. The kids today are going to be able to come up with a prompt like that. We don't think that way. So again, it's how technology is changing. Internally, we're trying to figure it out, right? We don't really have the answers. It's a challenge that we put to our agencies on a daily basis. I constantly send things back and I'm like, this is not gonna resonate. This is not gonna resonate. Don't hate me. This can be written better. And I'm a news junkie. I read absolutely everything. The first thing I do when I wake up is I spend 30 minutes on scrolling LinkedIn, and every, like I said, I named them all earlier. I scroll through it all to see how is conversation and dialogue changing. What are the key words? Because that's going to inform how we create content and how AI will help create the prompts. It's hard.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think specifically for Gen AI, and I mean, there's so much hype that's going on with this, right? I mean, every single day you're hearing about something related to Gen AI and AI. It's just such a hot topic that you're seeing all across the board. What's great is that I think we're starting to see more mature capabilities in terms of external partners having capabilities to be able to create content leveraging Gen AI and leveraging customer data. I think, like you said, I think relying on our agencies and having the ideal sort of model with our agencies where they should be using Gen AI in a responsible way to create maybe a large volume of content that then you can sort of review and say, okay, these are the ones you want to prioritize, these are the ones you want to move forward with, and then these are the ones ultimately we want to get to market. Using Gen AI for even LMR processes, right, in terms of taking existing content, making slight changes to that, and be able to get that content approved much quicker because it's a much smaller sort of review process compared to more novel content, right? So I see a lot of potential and promise with Gen AI, but obviously you have to have the human component to that, right, to make sure that ultimately the content that's coming out of Gen AI is ultimately going to be the ones that you want to put in the market, but also from a, I think just from a ethical perspective that it's also aligned to your important safety information and your label and so on and so forth. And of course you have to have the appropriate sort of monitoring governance in order to be able to do that.
The prompting is so key. It's like I used to say I was a pretty good Googler, but I'm not a good prompter, and now I need to become a good prompter. I just gonna be really honest. I feel like our team hasn't used it as much as we should. And I look at my friends in the D2C space, and I am so scared that they're gonna outpace me in the next year because they don't have the regulations that we do. But the ways that we have been trying to use it the most, I think applicable for us, is we're still controlling that long form content that we put so much time and effort into to make sure that it's right and it's educational, but then sending that over to these AI tools with our customer profile and saying, okay, knowing this and knowing the channel, write me 3 TikTok scripts about this, and like taking up that time, that and some of the captioning where it isn't as much about the the knowledge and the information, but how it's applied and lifting that thought process off of the team.
Are you relying on the agencies to use AI, or are you guys experimenting with it in-house?
What a good question. We are all in-house. So for us, it is really me and the team.
You and the team, okay.
We're both.
Both.
I would say we're trying to get to a model where we have in-house capabilities, but also leveraging external capabilities as well. We're relatively smaller companies, so we operate very lean, and we don't really have the right sort of internal knowledge and expertise. Yeah. So we do have to kind of rely on our external partners, our solution providers to, and again, I think we're seeing just the landscape evolve so much, and we're seeing just a lot of great advancements with solution providers that really have that expertise, that domain knowledge, right? That prompt engineering expertise to really build out effective solutions. So it always becomes that question of like, you know, buy versus build, right? Do we build our own, or do we have to buy it? And my personal opinion, I think, don't reinvent the wheel, right? If you have a solution that's really great, that's available, and it works for your needs, then what's the point in having to build that in-house?
I think, you know, another point is always remember that what we put out there doesn't just feed consumers, it feeds other tools. Last year, I had the opportunity to talk with one of the foremost experts in AI in the US, and he showed us an interesting little tool that's not out yet. It's being, I think it's got a $5 or $6 million funding with a startup. And he opened it up, and I think its name was like Ophelia or something like that. It was really interesting. Hey, Ophelia, my head hurts. Well, what do you mean? What are the symptoms? I'm so sorry that you don't feel well. This is the app talking to him. Well, you know, these are the symptoms that I'm feeling. Well, here's some over-the-counter suggestions that you could find. Let's see, you've got a Walmart near you and you've got a CVS near you. Okay, well, I don't know that those are really gonna work. You're gonna go see your doctor. Talk to them about XYZ. Well, what else? What kind of drugs are out there that you think, you know, this could maybe hint to? And then it started listing all of the diseases. And then it started listing all of the drugs from all of us in this room. It was a conversation with an app, and then it started listing all of the adverse events, and then it started listing, you know, the availability and the accessibility. Remember that what we put out, the audience as to how it's being picked up, just with how quickly. It was a little scary, but also very impressive.
Before we open it up to the audience for questions, you know, we heard from Jordana that she really led with this awareness-led approach for the Allegra Airways campaign. What KPIs are you guys focused on as you think about content sustainability?
That's a good question. So we will look at ROI by content. Right, so that is, did we create a content piece that was able to be used multiple times, and then how did that actually perform? This is especially helpful for us when we do UGC. We do a lot of UGC, so that is important. From a brand awareness standpoint, we're still figuring that out, honestly. We don't have the tools and the budgets for some of the big tracking and surveying that we'd like to do, and so we're really doing some rudimentary engagement and impression math right now to earn the right to be able to grow into an adult company that has all the tools and fun things.
Kristin, I appreciate the honesty. I mean, we don't have all the answers, right?
I think measurement is evolving. I think it's been evolving for the last, 10 years. I think similar, we're looking at the tried and true measurements of reach, but I always think of qualitative. I don't care about the reach if I reach the right people. If I reached the top 10 oncology digital opinion leaders, that's worth its weight in gold to me, and they take the content and reshare it, but I know that it's reaching them because it's going to reach the most influential. I know that my HCPs are reading them over everyone else than to have 100 million impressions. So quality is really important to me.
I think we, like other companies, we're moving into like a modular content approach across all of our channels. And our KPIs ultimately are about, if we can create content that's more personalized, do we see better engagement versus what we had done previously? So we can actually measure the difference in engagement rate between something that's more personalized and more modular versus something that was more of a one-size-fits-all. modular content also should give us the ability to be able to create assets and deploy assets much quicker as well, right? Through templates and through that design approach. And so we should be able to see a reduced time to actually get assets into the market, content into the market. And then we talked about the content reuse, right? There's also an opportunity through modular content to be able to reuse content. So measuring that also is important for us.
All right, well, first of all, big hand. These guys have great job, you guys. So do we have any questions for anyone on the panel? Thanks so much, Sue Manver from Publicis Health. Question for you culturally. We've been talking this morning about the difference between a culture where you can fail fast, move on, and learn, versus failure is not an option. We love all our content, but we know some of it works and some of it doesn't. Within your organizations, how do you make that case to leadership in terms of not everything is going to work, but we're learning, and instead of maybe testing things to death, we'll test things to life? How does that work in your organization?
I love that framework, test things to life. I'm going to use that now. Yeah. I think, and again, coming from a smaller company size, we're like, I think 250 all in or something around there. It really comes down to the trust between me and my C-suite team, right? And that if they trust me and my team, then we are given that leeway. And I feel like that is a part of my role here, is to continue to cultivate that trust. And that's really where I feel so fortunate that we have that relationship. It's a lot more challenging without it, because then you spend 10 times as much time reporting on the thing that you did and proving that it was worthwhile, whereas I feel very fortunate that I don't have to do that right now.
I mean, I think for me, so again, I came from the consumer world where if it failed, it failed, and if it did well, that's great. What did we learn? I was fortunate enough to work with Procter & Gamble for many years, and I think they're one of the best when it comes, if not the leader, when it comes to what's happening in terms of content. They're usually 5 years ahead of everyone else. They're brilliant. And that mentality, you can't get it out of my brain. So I fight a lot. I fight a lot with, like I said, my legal compliance. I'm always like, let me get you tacos, because I'm always pushing the envelope. Or let's try it this way. Have we ever done it this way? I think culturally there's also two answers there. I work in a global role. What works in the US doesn't work in Brazil, doesn't work in Germany, doesn't work in the UK, doesn't work in Australia, doesn't work in Japan or China or Saudi Arabia. So I think flexibility as well with that cultural overlay from a country perspective is really important. Latin America is all mobile, right? So any content we create, you gotta really be able to see it on your phone. For some reason, everybody in Latin America may not have a laptop, but they all have a phone, right? And so what are we creating that's quick and visual and easy access for our audience there? So yeah, I think sometimes it's just pushing until you get a yes.
Yeah, I would say that I think culturally, and I think many people experience this. I mean, we're very results, outcomes driven culture, right? We're focusing on performance and outcomes. I think it's the awareness and education about how experimentation, piloting, A/B testing, optimization, how that gets you to drive the right outcomes, right? And so for us, it is about sort of educating and creating that awareness within our organization, within our leadership, that we have those capabilities, that we don't know if this content's going to work, but we're going to test it, we're going to do A/B testing, we're going to do subject line optimization, so on and so forth, right? To be able to get to the outcomes that we need. And I think that's really helped our organization embrace more of that culture.
Okay, one more question.
Hello. So notoriously, I feel like I've seen a lot of high production quality videos out of your industry. I'm David, the fortune cookie guy. So notoriously, I've seen a lot high production, really quality stuff. Recently, there's been more of a trend to lower production quality, more shot on an iPhone, things that are getting more viral, and you talk about putting out content at scale. How do you put that in your content strategy, and how do you view it?
We are very low production over in my world. I think the higher production actually goes to support the sales side for B2B, I would say, because it's knowing your audience. Our audience is consuming on these channels that are lower production, or they welcome the lower production. So we welcome it too. How we do this at scale, I think we're still figuring out. We are also figuring out how do we develop UGC content in a thoughtful, testing way where we are learning and iterating but not over investing. I think there are platforms out there and there's a lot of how you approach briefing and things like that, but ultimately for us, where we are going accepts this variety, and so we're going to meet it where it's at.
I'm going to say I agree that a lot of that higher production quality is more on the sales marketing. From my perspective, I would go towards real life quality production because I think that resonates more. And what I try and do is just gather as much content as I can in a single moment in time to think through what are the next stories that I want to tell in the next 3 to 4 months. Because it changes every 4 months. What are the trends that I see for the next 4 months? And then create the capsules that I want, whether it's visual, written, audio, depending upon the channel and the audience. And I cut it and dice as I need to for that. So and that I do not rely on agencies for. That's something that I do myself. And just try and stay on top of the trends. And then from a country perspective, feed that out into sort of a guidebook for them to adapt as is right for their market. I'm not going to tell Brazil how to do their business, right? It's completely different.
Can I just say you've inspired me to try to get 3 months ahead of anything?
I didn't say I'm always successful, but I try.
We have one more quick question.
Ilona Retox, Spectrum Science. You talked a lot about content and it having to resonate with the right audience, also the tools that you use to produce that content. But what is the process that you leverage to align and determine what content to serve at which stage of the patient journey or HCP journey? Because let's face it, what you serve to a patient that is just been diagnosed is very different from the content that you will serve for someone that's already on a drug or is actively looking for treatment. And my second question is, how often do you find that you need to realign your website to the content that the audience is seeking? Do you often find gaps in the website information that you have to fill in and make the updates to be sure that it resonates with the target audience?
Yeah, I think those are both great questions, and I think maybe Ilona, you can come onto the stage and we talked last night, and I was going to say you're going to phone a friend and have you come up to stage. She's really awesome.
Tarak,
Yeah.
are you taking my job?
I'll try to answer the first and second question. I think as it relates to when is the right time to be able to get that content to the right audience, it goes back to the capabilities, and I mean, we can kind of talk all day about this, but the more that we can within our organization collect the data and the insights, have that data in our platform, have the capabilities in terms of being able to orchestrate, even at a more basic level, like having a CRM campaign and designing more of like a responsive CRM campaign so that we have a better understanding of like patients, for example, that are in our CRM campaign, what their needs are and where specifically they're at within the journey. Because it is very hard to be able to really kind of track at a patient level where that specific patient is. So we do need to get some input from that patient so that we can better serve them, right? So the more that we can be more adaptive, have more responsive approach to really meet the needs of the patients and where they are at that stage of the journey and how we can best support them with the right content to move that patient forward. As it relates to the second point around websites, I mean, this is just my personal opinion, but I think websites serve a great purpose for patients, maybe not as much on the HCP side of things. Really the doctors that we care about, are they actually going on brand websites? Probably not so much, right? But I think as it relates to patients, obviously you have insights to help inform your content, right? Leveraging, SEO, right? Having SEO strategies, so on and so forth, using organic search, content to be able to create your content and tailor that content into your website. But it's a very static process, right? In reality. So the more that we can get those insights so we can adapt that content and be able to, I think, align that to, those critical moments where you have to update your website, for example, if you have a label change or, so timing of that is critically important, but then also trying to do that in a more frequent manner, I think, is beneficial.
We are going to have to wrap, but you will be able to engage with Margarita more this afternoon at 12 p.m. at our roundtables to talk more about content.
Great.
Thank you guys so much.
Awesome job, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.